Thank you. That might be the coolest introduction I've ever had. I'm really honored to be here today, and I'm sure that it's a little intimidating to stand up in front of a room of people with scholarly communication as a part of it, because I don't feel terribly scholarly in my communication, so I'm going to try to do my best. What I have here is a talk that I like to go through, just sort of giving you some background on how a lot of people come to me and say, how did you get to be the CEO at MakerBot, or how did you get to be at Little Bits? And I have this long answer, and when I get interviewed a lot, people interviewing me say, can you tell me a little bit about your background? And I'm like, oh, it's not really a thumbnail sketch. So the thing that I'll weave through here is it's sort of a winding story, and at some point I'll tell it probably off the slides. So people ask me this a lot, and especially they ask me, how did you get to be in this position as a woman? So I need to answer that for people as well, because sometimes I'm talking with young women. I'd like them to know that they can do whatever they want to do. And then the other thing that that happens is that I owned a coffee shop and bookstores in Greenwich, Connecticut for 10 years, and the people in Greenwich, Connecticut know me as the lady who made them like coffee and sold them books. So they're really puzzled, really puzzled. And I still run into them and they're like, what? I don't get it. Like, last week you sold me a cappuccino and now you're selling me a 3D printer. So, like Howard said, with no further ado, my mother always told me that I could do anything I wanted to. And my mother's never come to hear me speak at something like this, which is somewhat good, but it would be really good for her to know the impact of having told me that I could do whatever I wanted to do, because she'd stand up here and tell you, hell yeah, and she did it. I took her really seriously. And as a kid, it just was never a question. She would say, go do this, and I would say, well, I don't want to do that. This is what I want to do, and I would go do that instead. So it really took form in terms of how I went through my life. And my parents were incredibly supportive of me taking the path and giving me a lot of independence. My father was a Marine, and when he and my mother, God, she'd really hate this story. He and my mother eloped when they were in college. They went to Ole Miss, and my mother went to college on a baton twirling scholarship, which she's really, unfortunately, not proud of. She was a South Jersey farm girl and ended up going to Ole Miss. She was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, in fact, for being, Ole Miss is a huge football school, and the whole support team for the football team was big. So she's on the cover of Sports Illustrated as a twirler, but she wasn't very proud of herself. So she always wanted to make sure that she passed on the message that you could do whatever you wanted. My brother's 8 years younger than me, and so I was in charge really early on. I mean, I was super in charge of the house. So my dad was, because my parents were young when they got married, my dad was in Vietnam when I was 2 and when I was 5, and my mother had not finished college, and she chose to finish college when I was 5 and my dad was on his second tour in Vietnam. And on top of that, she grew up on a dairy farm, so she really didn't know that parenting went beyond sort of go out and do something in the fields or go help in the barn. So I had a pretty open door policy as a young kid. I sort of found my way. She would go off to college, I would be in the apartment, and life was good. The sort of thing where you end up probably on the front cover of Facebook today, shamed for letting your kids roam free or walk to school on their own. So I was in charge really early on. My brother was left with me a lot. My parents, as they grew up, became college professors, so they were away teaching at night, and I was left in charge of my brother. And because he was so much younger than me, he had a peer group that was a really awesome way to make money because I could babysit for all of them. I sort of ran the town. I was home at Mother's Day recently and saw one of the kids that I had brought up with his kids. It was sort of weird to see them, but I'm friends with them all on Facebook, and It's really interesting. So I learned to take charge early on. I love to bring chaos to order. I mean, I love to bring order to chaos, and sometimes I bring chaos to order. No, there's very little order that I can bring chaos to. But I like to bring order to chaos, and I love to lead people and work with teams. I think I'm most excited when there's something that you can tell that there's just going to be an incredible soup, and there's lots of different ingredients, and you're not really sure how it's going to come together, and you get to work together to really make something fantastic. And I think that the thing that's most common in my career as I've sort of moved on past my 20s is exactly that concept. There's a movie about the 3D printing industry that I don't really talk a lot about because it's not, I think, our proudest moments. It's called Print the Legend. Has anyone seen it? It's great, so don't go home and watch it. It's a Netflix movie. And in it, the company who did the documentary followed MakerBot around for maybe 2.5 years. They were in our office a lot, got huge amount of information from us, became our friends, and then created a documentary that, like any documentary, has to create some friction in it. But the one thing that there are hours and hours of interviews with me, one of the things that they caught me saying was that I like to put a spine in a jellyfish. That's sort of, when I'm looking for something to do, I'm looking for an opportunity where there's something where you can see that if you put an infrastructure inside of it, it would really, really move. And that's really what I love to do. I went from this, which is not, like, if you play the flute or know anything about instruments, that's really not how you want to approach playing the flute. So this is where I started from, but I was a fierce first chair flute player all through high school, which meant that every day someone was challenging me for that seat, and I'm incredibly competitive. My dad loves it because all growing up I would say, I'm not competitive, and he would say, like, okay, you're not competitive. And I just likened it to the fact that as a girl growing up in the 70s and the 80s, sports wasn't something that girls naturally did. My brother was always off playing sports, but not me. But I always liked to get the best grades in the class. So I don't know why I didn't see that as being competitive, but I sort of had a killer instinct with it. Howard would tell you, didn't really have that killer instinct in college, although I did do some sports that had sort of a killer instinct. So I was a downhill skier, and I played rugby. So it came out then. And I think that in college it really came out more from, I like to run things. I was the manager of the food service, the freshman dining hall, and I sort of got to know everyone in college because of that. I opened up a dessert place. I was, I held leadership positions in my sorority. So when I look back on it, I'm like, I must have been kind of competitive. And I like to, people ask, how did you get there? My kids say to me, it's so easy for you. This 21-year-old, I'll say to him every day, he doesn't have a job right now. Have you applied for jobs? What have you applied for 10 jobs today? Have you called 10 companies? Like, oh, it's so easy for you. Like, it's not so easy for me. Like, do you think that I got here just by sitting here waiting for something to drop in my lap? To be an Olympic athlete, you have to fall on your butt a lot. I loved the ads for the Olympics, not the ads, but the little shorts that showed the Olympic athletes. I mean, you'd watch them and go like, oh, that was really awful, like people bending their legs inside out and broken, and then you see them winning a gold medal, a few years later. And in order to get to the top, in order to really succeed, in order to get there, you just have to keep trying and trying over and over. I think that one of the things that I loved about MakerBot in particular is that we were a failure-driven company. And it's sort of a counterintuitive concept. And in fact, having a large workforce of what we call millennials and teaching them about failure was actually really interesting, because these are kids who've played soccer all their life where both teams won. These are kids who, when you get a C in school, the teacher is calling the parent, what do I do? What do I do? Do we give them a C? Do we give it a B minus? These are kids who really haven't had much exposure to the concept that failure is okay. So at MakerBot, we really brought home the concept that you have to iterate and you have to learn and you have to go on to the next level in order to get better, in order to improve the experience, in order to innovate. So it's a real part of my fabric that it's okay to fail, it's okay to make a mistake, so long as you understand why and you take something forward and you go forward and do something with it. When I was a kid, I was going to be Quincy. Now, we only had a black and white TV until I was in college, and I wasn't allowed to watch TV unless my father had approved the list of shows that I checked off in the TV guide. Do you remember the TV guides? So I'd have to submit my list on Sundays, like this one I want to watch this week. And Quincy was one of the approved shows that we could watch together. But I really, really wanted to be Quincy. I just thought he was awesome. And I still love watching shows that are Quincy-like. So when I went to college, I was going to be a doctor. And then I took chemistry, and I failed. And iterated to become an applied math major, because that was something that I felt that I could be passionate about, but it was also something that I knew that I could succeed at. I also really, really love math because it has a beginning and an end to it. It wasn't this nebulous concept to me. I knew that if my homework was taking too long, that I was pretty sure that the problems in the book and the ones that the teacher had given to me had a solution, and that we were meant to be able to get them done. So it was a really finite sort of concept to me that math sort of felt bounded to me, and it also felt really core to the way that the world worked. So I became an applied math major. But my high school geometry teacher told me that girls couldn't do math and that I was going to fail. And that was in 10th grade. I remember very specifically, he was a wrestling teacher. He was pretty good looking, thought he was pretty cool. And he did stand up at the beginning of the year and say, "You girls are going to fail. You girls can't do math." And it was also, when we talk about my competitive edge, it definitely was in my head when I thought, well, I can't do chemistry, but there's something that I know that I can do, and I've got a point to prove. I remember going back to that teacher after my sophomore year of college and going in to visit him and letting him know that he was wrong. I think it's super important to know who you are. You know, a lot of people also will say, how do I get to be you? And I really like to push people back and say, well, how do you get to be what you want to be? Because you may not want to be me. When I had my bookstores, I had this a lot. People would come in and say, owning a bookstore was fascinating, because people would come in and say, what should I read? And I'd be like, I don't know. Like, what do you like? And they would say, well, what are you reading? I'm like, I'm pretty sure what I like may not be what you like. And I'd be looking at sort of, you know, a 65-year-old lady who'd grown up in Greenwich, Connecticut and had a very proper upbringing, and I was pretty sure that, like, the killer spy novel I was reading was not on her list. So I think it's really important for you to know who you are. Like, you may not want to be the CEO of a company. Being the CEO of a company means a whole lot of headache, a whole lot of work. It exchanges your personal life for professional life. But if you want to really know what you want to do, you really have to reach inside yourself and say, who am I? What's important to me? I most recently, when I left MakerBot, was in the position of deciding what I wanted to do next. And people would call me and say, do you want to come work here? Do you want to come, you know, we could use you here, we could use you there. And I'd be like, well, I have to really figure out what I want to do. And what I had to do was sit down and I had to do a gap analysis on myself. I had to look at what I knew and what I'd learned and what the skill sets that I had. And then I had to really ask myself, well, what do I want to do next? Because when I looked at sort of all the things that I had accomplished, there wasn't a lot of skill sets that I was looking to fill in. So I had to look then at what was intrinsically motivating me, what made me happy every day, what made me want to do it again. And it really took a long time for me to figure out what the important things were to me. And I created, this is a typical sort of geek factor in me and created a nice spreadsheet. It had all the things I wanted to do. It weighted them. It had like, it had a whole numbers scoring system. So I was able to put down all my options and objectively weigh them. And it gave me a really good picture in terms of what the value equation and the options in my life were. And it was surprising to me when I looked at the outcome, because my gut in terms of what I thought I wanted to do based on the options presented to me, when I looked at sort of how it weighed out with the importance factors, the answer wasn't the same as what I thought it was going to be. So it was a really interesting exercise to go through. When people come to me, a lot of times people come to me and say, we want you to come talk to us because you're a technology person. We want you to come and talk to us because you're a woman CEO. But I like to say that I'm all of these things. I'm a daughter, I'm a woman, I'm a mother, a wife, an entrepreneur, a leader, a mentor, athlete, and a person. Most importantly, I'm a person. And it's important to balance some of those parts. I don't know if you've ever been at work and you've thought like, whoa, I can't even find that other part of me anymore. And I know that I've been on long journeys with work where I'm traveling a lot and I'm at work all the time. I work in New York, which is a 2-hour commute from Fairfield, Connecticut, so I can get pretty disconnected. And when I have a hard time touching parts of me, like going, where's that mother in me? Where are my kids? When was the last time I saw my kids? I don't know what the laundry looks like. When I'm able to get to that point, I realize that something's out of balance and I have to put it back in balance, because I'm not the best person I can be if I don't weigh all those parts. So I'm going to go down, David Letterman is done, so I'm here. So these are sort of my top 10 tenets, and then I'll sort of run, at the end of this, I'll sort of go through my path from where I started to where I ended, and then I'll let you ask some questions. So don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do with your life. It's your life. I find that this is, I have 13 and 16-year-old stepchildren, and I have 21 and 24-year-old kids of my own. But I find this happening a lot, and I find this happening with girls a lot in particular, where people tell them they can't do something, or they shouldn't wear that, or they can't say something. And so don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't do. Even if it's outside the realms, like even if there's like a 20% chance that you're not going to achieve what it is, if you really want to do it, it's yours to try. So when people ask me, should I do this or shouldn't I do this, I'm not going to tell them that. I'll listen to them and help them weigh the options, but no one should be directing your life other than you. There's absolutely nothing to fear but fear itself. The worst thing anyone's ever going to say to you if you ask a question is no. I mean, they may not say it nicely, but really the worst thing that they're going to say is no. So, going to your boss and saying, I'd like to look at a career path where I'd like to go, be an accountant instead of a writer. And your boss could say, no. Or your boss could say, well, what would that look like and how do you get there? But if you don't ask your boss, or if you don't go to someone and ask them that, or you don't ask the question, you're going to stuck being the writer who wants to be an accountant instead of asking the question of how I get there. So I say this to kids who are looking to college. Should I apply here? Well, the worst thing that's going to happen to you is someone's going to say no. Now, you have to be able to handle someone saying no, right? And the bruise is inside, and it's your ego, and it's like, whoa, that's not what I wanted. But it's yours to take then. It's yours to take. Well, you can say, well, hell no, I'm not going to take that. Or you can say, well, why did they say no? And you can have a dialogue. But if you don't ask, you're just never going to know. You have to ask for help early and often. I mean, I think that this is working with entrepreneurs and sort of coming into entrepreneurial companies as someone who's working to bring some order into what feels like chaos. I think that it's critical that people ask for help early and often. My first company that I founded in 1991 was ended up being an outsourcing company. It was outsourcing before outsourcing was in vogue. And I had probably about 65 engineers working for the company. And they were all network administrators and TCP/IP people, pretty hardcore Unix people, pretty geeky guys, mostly. And their whole, the whole way that they like to operate was to go out and find a problem to solve and own it, a really good, juicy problem. And they'd own it, and then they'd solve it, and they'd be like, I am great because I solved that problem. And I turned them all over and said, that's not how we're going to operate. We're going to create a database of all the solutions to problems that you've seen before. So we're going to have problems, and we're going to tie the solutions to them. And when you get a problem on a customer's site, the first thing you're supposed to do is send an email out to everyone and say, has anyone seen this problem before? And the second thing you're supposed to do is go look in the database and see if there's an answer. And if someone solved the problem before, then you work together with them to solve your problem. You don't get to own it. So the only way that you could actually end up owning a problem was if no one else had solved it before. And then you got to work together to solve the problem. So my engineers learned so much because they asked for help always. They always had to say, have you seen this before? Can you help me? And they learn so much faster. So you're going to learn a lot faster. You're going to get a lot more information if you ask for help. I do think that there's a lot of things that happen in life, and I think that this is a reality that I've come to recently. There's a lot of things that happen in life. There's a lot of things that happen professionally. There's certainly a lot of things that happen in the way that a company grows that are unavoidable. I was talking to someone the other day, and I said, it doesn't matter how much information you have. It's still like having a baby. Like, there's this 9-month thing that you just can't avoid. You're pregnant. At the end of 9 months, you're going to have a baby. And at the end of that, after you've had the baby and you've gotten over the shock of having the baby, you might actually then say, I think I'll have another one, right? But that is, you're going to go through the same steps again. That's absolutely unavoidable, unless you're going to go adopt a baby, right? But someone's going to go through that pain for that baby as well. So there's sometimes things that are just unavoidable. And you can ask for help along the way to get through them, but you can't avoid some of the steps that have to happen. This is something that I tell management people who work for me all the time, and leaders and entrepreneurs. You really have to stop, look, and listen. One of my most favorite statements recently is, slow and easy wins the race. It's much better to stop, look around, take stock, listen, really actively listen before you move ahead. And in fact, when things are chaotic and crazy, I think that you have to do this more. My most favorite business book is a book called The Boys on the Boat. Has anyone read The Boys on the Boat? You might not think of it as a business book. So one of the things that I'm a rower, and the book is about rowers, the 1936 men's Olympic rowing team. And it's one of the best books I've ever read on teams and how teams work together, and how all the parts of a team have different roles and have different skill sets, but when they really work all together well, that it's a really well-oiled machine. The takeaway, one of the things that's really interesting in the book is it talks about how the rowers won the races, and they won their races by rowing at a very slow, very hard rate. And a lot of people feel like in a situation where they want to get ahead, if they move really quickly all the time, they're going to get there faster. And I've come to learn that sprinting a marathon is a good way not to get to the finish line. Once you climb up a mountain, you need to turn around and help the next person up. It's really no good if you get to the top, and then you're like, I'm at the top, and everyone's down below you trying to get to the top, and you stay down there. So when people talk to me about women getting to the top, this is the biggest piece of advice I give to them. If you get to the top, if you get to a key position, when that little girl emails you and says, can I talk to you? When a woman in college calls and says, I'm thinking about coming into your career. When the woman next door, who's 2 levels down from you, wants to know how she can go from being a manager to a VP, take her hand and help her. Give her the answer. Take the time to answer the email. Take the time to answer the phone. They're not going to take your job. They're not going to eat your lunch. It's really, really important to realize when you get to the top that you got there with the help of a lot of other people. And then it's really your job then to turn around and help someone else. You've got to share your experiences, hopes, and dreams for other people to realize theirs as well. Everyone has their own path. You have to follow yours. You also have to be really kind and gentle to yourself. It's no good if you go home and beat yourself up. If you have a bad day, go home and say, why did I have a bad day? What was bad about that? What did I do that was good, though? What's the part that I can give myself something good here for? Did I have a hard conversation with someone? Did I stand up for myself? Whatever it is, but it's better to be kind and gentle to yourself than beat yourself up and say, I'm never going to get anywhere. This is really too frustrating. It's not going to work. You have to network. You always network. I left the industry world for about 10 years when after 9/11, I bought a bookstore in Greenwich, Connecticut. And the conversation with buying the bookstore kind of went like this. I went to the old man who had the bookstore. He was this awesome guy. He looked sort of like Santa Claus crossed with a tennis player. And he had this bookstore that had been in Greenwich, Connecticut forever. It was this dark, dark green, sort of subway-looking bookstore, maybe 1,000 square feet. And I said, and he put in the paper that it was for sale. So I went and I said, hey, I want to buy your bookstore. And he's like, you can't buy my bookstore. I said, what do you mean I can't buy your bookstore? My mother told me I can do anything I want to do. So I'm going to buy your bookstore. And he said, you know, I was working for VC at the time, and he said, you VC guys don't know how small business runs. And I'm like, I'm smart. I can probably figure it out. And he said, not going to do it. So if you really, really want to prove to me that you can do it, come work the Christmas season for me. And I'm like, okay, you know, I can do that. You know, a good way for him to get free help. And Christmas in a bookstore isn't fun. So, you know, I'm sure that he thought this you know, Greenwich person is just she'll burn out. So I came in, I worked the Christmas season, I totally fell in love with the business. It had a very strong event business. And so the event that he had during that time period was Bill Cosby, Anita Shreve, and I can't remember who else, but it was sort of like, I've got to do that. So I ended up buying the bookstore. And I remember calling Brad Feld, who is a really longtime friend of mine, who's well known in the VC technology world. And I called him, he was my boss at the time, and said, hey, I'm thinking about buying a bookstore. And he said, I was working as an entrepreneur in residence at that time for SoftBank, and my job was to find the next startup that they could invest in. And he said, pretty sure that independent bookstore wasn't what we were thinking about. So I think you're on your own at that point. And I said, yeah, I understand that, but I'm just sort of curious what you think. You know, what should I do? And he said, well, you know, what do you want to do? What is it that's driving you? And I wanted to be home. I wanted to see my kids. I didn't like, after 9/11, on 9/11, all the people that I really cared about in my world were not present, were not where I wanted them to be. And I was traveling a lot, so it was a really transitional moment for me. And I said, you know, I'm really worried that if I leave technology, that, you know, at the end of the book gig, whenever that ends, I won't have anything to do. And he said, he gave me some good words of advice. He said, well, you have to stay in touch with everything. You have to keep your network active. You have to stay current. And he said, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? The worst thing that's going to happen is that it fails. And then you close it down and do something else. And so I said, well, that sounds completely doable. And so that's what I did. And 10 years later, when I came back out of it, I still had a very hot network. You know, Facebook and LinkedIn and MySpace. Do you remember MySpace? were just sort of coming into play. LinkedIn, I don't even think was a thing at that point. So it was pretty much through email and verbal communications. But when I came back in, I was able to go to someone I knew and said, I'm looking for a new position as an executive. She was the CEO of a company. She said, come work for me. And when I went to do my next thing, I went to another friend and said, I'm looking for the next thing. And he said, well, I have a position for you. And when I was done with that, I called Brad Feld, and I was like, I can't do these jobs anymore. Do you have something good for me? And he said, I got this guy, Bree Pettis, who owns this company called MakerBot. You should go visit it just simply to go visit the bot cave. And he said it's in Brooklyn, New York, and I thought I should go visit it. I've never been to Brooklyn. So I got in my car and went over the Brooklyn Bridge, which was quite an experience if you've never been over, into that part of New York and you're from Connecticut. And I went to the bot cave, and the bot cave was this really dark, it was this really dark sort of factory building, an old beer building from I don't know, the 1800s, with these people making things in it and these big globe lights, and they were making 3D printers. And I saw my first 3D printer, and before that, I thought, what's a 3D printer? Do you take plastic? Do you take paper and fold it in to make things? I don't really get it. And a 3D printer is incredible. It takes a 2D image, 2D idea, creates a 3D virtual image, and then actually makes it in plastic, in hard plastic. So my mind got blown, and I went in and I said to Bree, I want to work for you. And Bree said, I don't need you. We're all set here. We've got 40 people. We're going to become a public company in a year, and we're all set. And I went home and said, you're not all set. You need me. And I spent the next sort of few weeks negotiating with him on how to come on board. And we finally figured out a way to do it, and I'm super happy that that happened. But it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have kept my network active. I said this earlier, you're never going to know the answer if you don't ask, right? You just have to ask. I did it the other day to someone in the store. They had on some sandals that I thought were really cool looking, and she was standing in line. I said, where'd you get those shoes, and who made them? And I said, I'm just sort of curious who made them. She's like, I don't remember. And it's well, does it say inside your shoe? She took her shoe off, and it did. So I had the answer. Whoa. If you're offered a seat on the rocket ship, get on and don't ask which seat. This is from the book Lean In. Lean In has a lot of interesting advice in it. Some of it I agree with, some of it I don't, but it's certainly been a transformational book where you can say to a lot of people, read this book. It's got some good advice in it. One of the things I learned from being in various 12-step programs is that with any information, you get to take what you like and you get to leave the rest. You really can read a book like Lean In and take all the parts in it that really resonate with you and carry it forward. And this is one that I really, really love. If you want to get on the moon, you're going to have to get on a rocket ship. If you really want to be a part of something that's moving fast, people ask me this a lot because I like to be in high-growth companies. But I'm going to go and take the position that I get as I go into that company. It really doesn't matter to me what the position is. It matters to me that I'm on that journey and that I'm going to be there and we're going to get to the moon with it. So when I started working for Bree, we couldn't figure out what I was going to do. He said, why don't you come and be HR? And I was like, sure. Pretty sure that wasn't really what the role was, but when I got there, he introduced me to people as, this is a pretty geeky company. She's HR++. And I'm like, yeah, like C++. And we ended up evolving it into be head of people, and we changed the title. So, I came in, I did what needed to be done. I did, what is it that we need to do to put the company together so that we can take this rocket ship to the moon? It didn't matter what my title was. It didn't matter what it was. So long as I had a role in taking it there, that's what was important to me. Make sure that you wake up every day looking forward to what's in front of you. And if you don't, change directions. You can do it. It's so much more important that you're happy going through your day and that you like what you're doing. And if you find that you're in the car on the way home trying to kill the person next to you because you just had a bad day at work, right? That's like a huge waste of your energy. So I always like to look at things in terms of like what the balance sheet looks like. Like, am I taking my energy and expending it somewhere negative? If I'm expending it somewhere negative, that's just not good for me. So how do I make sure that it's positive energy? It's all in your hands to make a change. And to put yourself in the position of, it's so powerful if you're using all of your energy in a positive way and you're feeling good about what you're doing and you're learning and growing and doing what you need and even making bold changes sometimes. And it's possible. It's possible for people to do it. You know, people say to me, that's just silly. I have to support my family. I'm like, right, but you support your family better when you're smiling and happy and you give them like nice food and you smile and you say, how was your day? Instead of like, eat your dinner. So those are the things that are really important. You're really important. You're the most important person in your life. You know, the other thing that, you know, it's been stolen by the airlines, but you got to put the oxygen mask on you before you put it on anyone else. Otherwise, no one's gonna survive if you don't take care of you first. It's really, really critical. And there are no easy answers. I mean, life is work. It's really, really hard work. My 24-year-old and his girlfriend break up sort of every 3 days. And I seem to be the counselor for both of them. And they call and they say, like, this is, you know, we had an argument about something. I'm like, right, that happens and you have to solve it. You know, you don't just say, I'm walking out. You've got to solve it. But it was hard, but it hurt his feelings, but it didn't feel right. And I'm like, right, but you've got to stand up for yourself. You've got to support your position, and you've got to be gentle and honest with each other. That's hard, hard work. Or people call and say, like, I applied to 10 different jobs and got rejected from 10 places. Like, how did you get your job? You know, did it just happen? No, it didn't just happen. My mother told me one day when she was looking for work, she said, I'm just going to go to sleep and think good thoughts about it. I was like, wow, that's probably not going to work. If anything looks easy on the front, it's not. You know, I tell my kids this a lot. They're like, well, look how happy they are. I'm like, yeah, you know, maybe he beats her at night. Who knows? But what you see on the outside doesn't mean that that's what's going on inside. People work hard. They make choices every day. They're conflicted. There are ups and downs. Relationships never look, you know, never are on the inside what they look like on the outside. So don't judge that book by its cover, not to be, you know, too coy here. Know that it's hard work. And if you're working hard, you're going to get to where you want to go. And if you're guiding yourself, you're going to get there as well. So that's what I have here. I'll give you a quick rundown of it's a really quick sort of synopsis, and then I'll let you ask questions. Does anyone have a question? If no one has questions, I'll let you go drink more coffee. So I graduated from Union College in 1985 with a degree in applied math. And I couldn't find a job coming out of college. I wanted to be in technology. That I had in my head that I wanted to do something as an electrical engineer. I was an applied math major. And I was sort of arrogant about that because I thought that math majors are sort of better than electrical engineers, and we could go do the electrical engineering work. But I couldn't find a job, partly because I was a woman. With at that time, there was sort of a weird degree. Like, it wasn't, you're an engineer. You have this, you know, ticking off these boxes. Now it's a lot easier because you can say, like, I went to college and I have a degree in music and history. Can I go be an accountant for you? And someone will consider it. So that's great. I love that we've made that allowance for people. So I went to be an assistant in a small consulting engineering firm. And that meant I was like the secretary to the secretary of a principal engineer in a very traditional company. And they found out that I could write, so they let me write the newsletter. And the newsletter was made on the CAD system. That's weird. I used to print out the newsletter on these like huge architectural Mylars. The good thing is that I learned CAD. And we had this little CAD department. We had tons of drafters, a little CAD department, and the leaders of the company said, we're going to throw the CAD system out. This is definitely not worth it. I'm like, are you crazy? Like, we were at that point doing interior designs for high-rise buildings. And like, if you're a plumbing drafter, that means that you draw toilets on the same floor, on each floor in the same place on every drawing. And it's a riser, and you draw the same thing 21 times. And with a CAD drawing, you have one outline, you put the toilet in one place, and you print it out 21 times, and you've got 21 floors. So how could that be less good than a guy drawing something 21 times? So they gave me this task of proving to them that the CAD system was worth it. And so I ended up running the CAD department, proving to them that it was worth it. And then my boss left, and she went to work for another engineering firm, and she took me with her. So networking, I didn't know that's what it was. And she took me with her, and I went to this small consulting company to run their computer network. Knew nothing about computer networks, but I thought that sounded like a cool and fun thing to do. And it was a Novell network, and so I learned all about how to run this computer network. The guy who ran that company was crazy. It was in the 80s, he did a lot of coke, he screamed a lot, he fired a lot of people. I left after maybe 8 months. I was one of the most senior people there, so it wasn't good. I left there, and I had called my friend Robin from college and my friend John from college, and they were working at MIT Lincoln Laboratory, and I said, hey, do you think you could see if there's any jobs for me there? So I got a job at MIT Lincoln Laboratory, and that job was to be the system administrator for real-time computer systems in a big Unix system that they had just bought. And it took me almost a year to get my security clearance. So I went to MIT Lincoln Laboratory, spent about a year taking training classes in Fort Lauderdale on the systems, which was awesome because I learned C. And then I supported the computers that they had for a project that we were working on, and I wrote real-time code for a radar system. So wrote the code that controlled the transmit and receive and the IFF system for what was a stealth radar project. Super, super cool, but I decided that I didn't like working in a government black project-funded company, so I decided to leave there, and I went to work for a company called Stardent. Stardent was a company started by Bill Poduska. This is taking you back in the early computer days, who founded Prime and Apollo, really early days of computing, and was running their Unix networks. And they were invested in by Kubota. This was at a time when the Japanese were really working on how to infiltrate technology companies in America to take IP back to Japan. So they invested in Stardent, sucked all the IP out of it, and closed Stardent in 1991, Halloween 1991. And the company splintered into a lot of different companies, and they all wanted me to go work for them. So my solution was to start my own company so that I could go work for each of them on my own terms. And that's how I started my company, Nett Damon's Associates. And I started that in 91. I had, let me see, Thomas was probably, I don't know, 6 months old, 6-month-old child. My husband didn't really make a lot of money. I don't know why I did it. I don't know what got me. I just said, I can do this. Started a company with 2 people, bootstrapped it. We were about 55 or 60 people when I sold it. We had locations in Boston, Boulder, and Mountain View, California. Sold it to what became Interliant. I sold my company to Interliant one day. They bought, it was Sage Networks the day I sold it. The next day they bought a company called Interliant. My company doubled the size of the company. They bought Interliant. It doubled the size of the company, and a month later we went public. And we bought another 15 companies after that. So it was a roll-up of about 27 companies. I worked there for about a year and a half, and that's how I ended up moving from Boston to Greenwich. Then I was an entrepreneur in residence for Brad Feld at SoftBank that became Mobius Technology, and then I bought this bookstore. So I bought Just Books. I bootstrapped another bookstore. Never, ever, ever just bootstrap a bookstore. Anyone here thinks that's a good idea? It's a really, really bad idea. Bookstores suck down a lot of cash, and deciding that you're going to suck down all of your cash and get it back isn't probably a good way to live your life. I also decided to buy the coffee shop next to it. Not also a great way to make money, but I had these awesome businesses in Greenwich, Connecticut, probably 10 of the best years of my life. teaching kids how to read, turning the town into authors, and just really having a great time, being able to see my kids grow up. I left there and I was a COO of a company called RAM Scientific, which is a medical devices company. Went from there to be the SVP of operations for Mercury Solar, so a really big solar installer. Learned a lot about solar, which is really interesting. And then left there to work at MakerBot. And then I am 2 weeks into a job as the Chief Strategy Officer at a company called LittleBits. LittleBits makes little snap circuits that allow you to create and innovate a world of technology using circuits. And that's my story. So if there are any questions, I'd love to hear them. Take this one first. And then...
Hi.
Yep.
So to what extent do you feel lucky?
I don't think, I think people ask that, my kids will say that to me, like, oh, like, it's so easy for you. These things just fall in your lap. And I don't think there's a lot of luck involved with it. I mean, it's a lot of hard work. It's been a lot of hard work, and it's been a lot of doing things that don't always feel right or feel good. So I don't think it's luck. I do feel like I'm willing to take a risk and then see how it works. So, and a lot of times when I think people mistake the concept of luck with someone who's actually taken a pretty big risk and executed on it.
Hi, Dave Martinson from the American Chemical Society. First, I just wanted to say I've seen Print the Legend, and from the outside, it didn't seem like a hatchet job. I thought it was a pretty good documentary. But one of the things they talked about there was the decision to take the MakerBot and go from kind of an open source, community-driven, crowdsourced development platform to a proprietary IP patent structure, and the kind of the turmoil that caused amongst the people that have been part of the community. And I wonder if you could comment on that decision and the impact of it.
I was actually talking to a bunch of 7th graders recently, and they asked me a similar question, which was disturbing. So I think that, first off, there's some misconceptions about what open means. MakerBot was on a mission to bring desktop 3D printing to the world, is on a mission to bring desktop 3D printing to the world. And it's a long adoption cycle. As a matter of fact, I think if you look at the adoption cycle in the internet world, as well as home computers and home 2D printers, they're very similar trajectories and paths. But it's probably a 15-year adoption cycle. So we had to move beyond our market of the DIY hacker market. And we started out as a company that had RepRap at its base, which is totally open hardware, totally open software system. And as we evolved it and grew the company, we were investing in technology and people and solutions that didn't necessarily incorporate all open as we were doing the investment. So we made a choice when we came out with the MakerBot replicator to not close the system, but for the first time, we decided not to open the hardware. And that meant that we didn't publish everything that was in the hardware. And we closed some of the software, but it was pretty much almost 90% open. So it incorporated a fairly strong body of open software. And there was a little bit of a riot in the world because of it. And if you look at that box, it's probably, Bree and I have talked about it, it's probably 80% open, maybe 20% not. And that's not odd in the hardware world. We did that because we were investing a lot in the company and a lot in the people, and there are parts that we invested in that we weren't a reason why we were going to give it away. So it wasn't necessarily a decision to go proprietary. Proprietary speaks of something very different than being closed or open. And so there's sort of gray areas here. And the hardware world and the hardware entrepreneurial world has a lot of this going on at the moment. Even Arduino's has a lot of issues with it. The concept of IP and patents doesn't mean that you're not open. And in fact, it's causing a lot of confusion. So one of the things that I think is challenging is the patent system in this country and the world is pretty broken and needs changes. But there are smaller companies working within a large world that's very IP-driven. And in fact, Stratasys owns massive number of patents in the technology world, and 3D Systems does as well. And they use them very defensively to keep people out of markets. The reason that MakerBot came to play is because of expired patents. So it's not a black and white answer of we went closed, we certainly didn't go proprietary. It's that there are parts of the system that we had invested in that we chose to keep for our own. We've been filing patents and IP since MakerBot's inception. So the concept that one of the parts in the movie that's sort of misrepresentative is that we suddenly started filing patents. And in fact, after that movie came out, there was a lot of focus on it. There was a lot of Twitter chatter about MakerBot's patent troll, and they've filed all these patents suddenly, and we hadn't. As a matter of fact, in order for us to have been awarded the patents, they had to have been out for a while. They'd gone already through all the prior art discoveries, but MakerBot's very active with IP, and I'm working in a hardware company now, and IP is another part of what we're doing. So I don't think that patents and IP, open, closed, and proprietary, are necessarily well understood in the general world as to what it means, and people have interesting reactions to them without looking at the gray areas with it. It's a really long explanation. Sorry. Another question?
Hello.
Hello.
My question is, by the way, I'm Jacob from Beaumont, Texas.
Nice to meet you.
And my question is, I have a friend who wants to start a business. She's encountered two obstacles: lack of funding and lack of resources. And one day I was talking with her about it, and I said, you know what, it sounds to me like you're using these two obstacles as a way to hide your fear of failure. She looked at me right in the eye and said, that's exactly what I'm doing. And I was just wondering if you had any advice that I could bring home to her about this, because she is really talented, and I believe that if she started her business, she would be successful.
So, a lot of people come to me and say, I want to start a business, how do I do it? Or I want to start a business and I can't raise the money. And I usually go in the direction of, let's talk about what your risk profile is. And sometimes someone who's an entrepreneur may not be the big risk taker. So when there's someone who has some of the risk aversion and isn't necessarily able to figure out that next step of taking the leap with no money, how you do it, or how do you get a funder, is it's good for them to partner up with someone who does know how to take that risk, or who is willing to take that risk and bring their idea to life. It doesn't mean that they're not the founder. It doesn't mean that they're not the person starting the company, but one of the things that I've found in my life is that you need a balancing partner. So I was at NetDaemons, I was the big thinker, the CEO. I had a very strong ballast to me, which was my CFO. At MakerBot, Bree was a huge big thinker, and I was his ballast, which sometimes wasn't great because I'm not always good ballast, because I like to think big too. But it's good to put counterweight to that. So she may have an awesome idea that could really come to ideation, and partnering up with someone who knows how to take that risk and go find the money or the resources, and no matter what, might be a better way than for her to do it. Not everyone who's a founder has to be the CEO. Not everyone who's a founder has to act like the CFO. And in fact, sometimes those people are just really bad at that, so they shouldn't. So they should find someone who's really good at it and let them do it. That's my advice. Any other questions? One more here.
First of all, thanks. Great talk, really interesting. You said a couple of things that I found slightly contradictory. You said, you've got to get on the rocket ship if you want to get to the moon. You're not going to be afraid of the pace and the excitement. but you also said that you can't sprint a marathon, right? You've got to go slow and steady. And I wonder if is there some contradiction there, or how do you resolve those two things?
It's interesting. Again, sometimes I pull my analogies back to the sports that I play. So rowing is one that I like a lot because there's a lot of sort of contradictory thinking in it. Even in a long rowing race, a head race, you do a lot of sprinting in it to move to the next milestone, to get to the next place, to pass the next boat. So I think that you can't sprint a marathon 100% of the time. Sometimes in a high-growth startup, you sprint it more than you'd like. But if you sprint it the entire time, it will burn out. So you have to run the sprints and then plateau and figure out where you're at. Startup companies have a lot of step functions in them, and inflection points, and being able, sometimes you sprint up to that inflection point and sort of go through it carefully so that you know where you're going next. I think that that's more of what I look for. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you for having me.